Hi, welcome to Culture Determined. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade, and my guest today is Douglas Lain. Doug, welcome back. Can you please
Hi.
introduce yourself?
Yeah, I have been on before. I think we talked about Kill All Normies, which
Yes,
is a
I think you've
book
been on
that,
twice before.
yeah. And the what I am is I'm the former publishing manager for an imprint out of the UK called Zer0 Books. It's a left-wing um, imprint. We did critical theory and political books, and sometimes we even published fiction. Um, and I was hired to be the publishing manager there around 2015, early 2015. I'm also a novelist and a podcaster, and I guess a YouTuber. It's one of those designations that I feel wary to embrace, and yet it's probably how I'm mostly known.
Yeah, I
So
sort of feel the same way. This is obviously I'm getting off topic immediately, but I see at least Twitter has decided to call people just content creators, like people who do Twitch streams and have like
mhm,
teenagers, like millions of teenage fans watching them play video games and stuff. It'll
mhm.
just and this world is totally opaque to me, but I'll see it on trending topics or something. It'll be like content creator, Great Gazoo, did XYZ, and everyone's going nuts about it. So maybe we're all just content creators
Yeah, I think we are.
these
And whether
days.
we write songs or write novels or produce academic tomes or play video games online, we're all content creators now.
Yeah, we're just creating content for the great algorithm in the sky, in the
Yeah,
cloud. That's
yeah. Our whole
spitting.
lives it's just content for the algorithm in the sky.
Yeah, and okay, and so Zer0 Books uh, published a number of titles that where I've had the guest on this show, and so just a couple weeks ago, um, I had Mike Watson
Yeah,
with this book, The Miming Mark Fisher. I had Ben, is it Burgess or Burgess?
Burgess. Yeah,
Burgess, his book, Canceling Comedians While the World Burns, or the title, something
yeah,
like that. And
yeah.
then Kill All Normies was a huge hit for you, and you came on and talked about that. The author, Angela Nagel, did
Right.
not, for various reasons, perhaps lost in the sands of time. And yeah, so and you're putting out a lot of interesting stuff that caught my eye as someone who is not within the world of leftism or socialism, or just writing about stuff going on in the current day and from an interesting angle and an interesting way.
Hmm.
And so that's, I guess, how we sort of got to know each other a little bit. And then,
Right.
then a couple months ago, you got fired, ejected. There was a coup. How would you describe
Okay.
what happened?
Okay. It's a dispute. It's disputed as to what happened, which is kind of surprising. Um, what happened was Watkins Media, which is a publishing company in the UK, purchased John Hunt Publishing. Actually, it's Watkins Publishing purchased John Hunt Publishing, and uh, Watkins Publishing has a number of imprints, one of which is called Repeater. And Repeater was the imprint that the people who used to run Zer0 Books, the imprint that I worked for, found it. So the Repeater is the people from Zer0 Books. When they left in 2014, they started Repeater at Watkins. And they wanted at that time to keep the Zer0 Books name and logo and manifesto and imprint and take it somewhere else. John Hunt, who owned it, didn't let them. He said, no, you can't have that. So they started another imprint at Watkins. And apparently, all this time, they've been wanting that Zer0 Books back. And so when Watkins purchased John Hunt Publishing, they told Dominic, who's the person who was managing John Hunt, that they wanted Zer0 Books and that I was to stop accepting new books. And my team was to stop accepting new books, which when I heard that, from my perspective, meant that as publishing manager, I had been let go, which was not surprising to me, actually, because I knew who they were and what they wanted. I knew that would want Zer0 Books back if they ever purchased the company.
Mm-hmm. And so I want to try to give enough background information for people who the layperson who doesn't follow publishing
Right.
trends in left-wing media.
So like, what is Zer0 Books? What is Zer0 Books might be the place to start. Like, what was Zer0 Books when they ran it? What was Zer0 Books when I ran it? So Zer0 Books was this sort of left-leaning cultural studies imprint that was started under John Hunt Publishing in, I think, around 2009, and it was one of the first books they published was a book by Mark Fisher called Capitalist Realism. Overall, their original authors were drawn from a group of academic bloggers. So these would be young academics who weren't necessarily tenured, or if they were just starting out, and they weren't only publishing in stuffy journals, but they were online trying to do exciting things on blogs. So, and you had like Graham Harmon come out of that. You had Mark Fisher come out of that. Another title, I don't know if Eugene Thacker came out of the blogging scene or not, but one of the other big successful titles that they had was In the Dust of This Planet, which was a book about nihilism. And it was a kind of a surprise hit that it was published in early days, and then a few years later became a big hit because the cover appeared in a music video. and then Glenn Beck caught wind of it and denounced it as a
that's great for sales, I'm sure.
Yeah. So anyway,
okay, so was it always primarily like a UK sort of thing, or from the beginning it was UK? Because
no, but Eugene Thacker's American. He works at the New School.
Okay, but so John Hunt there is a person John Hunter was.
He's still around. He just retired.
And so he is British, and the company is
in the UK.
Is in the UK.
But sells books in the United States as well. Yeah.
Okay, and then but was the original staff mostly British?
Yeah, the original staff was British. Yeah, they were all in London, I think. But overall, for John Hunt, the staff is like they're all freelancers and they're all working around the world. So in the United States, and at one point in Egypt and France, and just everywhere, because it's very low overhead, done remotely. It's sort of a newish publishing model. It's the company was started out of a shack in John Hunt's backyard originally. Like that's the mythos. And like unlike the story of how Apple computers began, it never really got a whole lot beyond that shack. I mean, there's an office somewhere now, but so that's the background. But the main thing was that the reason the old group of editors at Zer0 Books left John Hunt was partly because of that fact of the whole company running on a shoestring and operating as a digital kind of computerized publishing effort. So there was a lot of automated systems. It was all about the back end. It was all about, click this button here, make sure that this automated email goes out there, respond to, to this prompt here. And the whole idea was to limit the amount of labor time it took to produce a book down to almost nothing, as low as possible. The only people who would be really touching the books and spending time on them were first the publishing manager and readers selecting the titles, reading them, and selecting which ones would be published, then the copy editors, and then the production team. But with as little contact with the authors as possible was John Hunt's model.
Okay, and this is and so I get the sort of the monthly catalog over email of John Hunt, and a lot of stuff they publish was not similar to Zer0 Books. It was
right. No, most of it's not. Like pagan
how would you
books.
describe a lot of the other stuff they publish?
I would say it's eclectic. I think the interest of John Hunt was leaning towards Christianity and mysticism. Maybe I'm not exactly sure, but I noticed.
So, stuff about sort of I don't know, like New Agey, or stuff about like Wiccan thought, like stuff like that, just stuff that it seemed an odd fit with the materialist world of socialist politics. I thought,
Right,
just
right.
as someone who
Yeah,
came
no,
from
I
the
know.
outside.
It was like total opportunism on everybody's part. It's like there was an existing publisher and they had imprints, and they had this model that was sort of inhuman, focused on limiting the amount of human labor involved. And that meant that there weren't a lot of eyes on a vision for the whole thing, you know? And so when they hired someone, that person had a lot of freedom. That team had a lot of freedom. So like I had a lot of freedom when I was at Zer0 Books to try different things and direct the imprint the way that I wanted it to go. And like when I first started in Zer0 Books, I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity for me to push my Marxist humanist line and bring my Marxist humanist buddies onto the stage. So I was like infiltrating. But it worked out. I mean, we published a lot of good things ourselves. But we started kind of after the blogging scene had died out. So like the big bloggers had their day, and then by 2014, it was clear that Facebook and Twitter and social media and what was it, Web 2.0, that had changed everything, and blogging was becoming less and less viable,
Right,
as a way to get places. And so that also meant that apart from the surprise hit of In the Dust of This Planet, I think the Zer0 Books imprint was sort of looking around as to how to find a foothold in the attention market, like online, how to make get ahead. And they had good Twitter account, and they had some things going, but it was for me anyway, it was difficult to figure out how to grab everyone's attention online, and and also where to look for authors.
mm-hmm.
So what I did was I tried a number of different things. I started writing BuzzFeed listicles at first, and those didn't go anywhere. but I thought, those can go viral. We'll try to see if that. No.
Uh-huh.
And then I was already podcasting, and that did okay. I got, my podcast actually declined when I took it and rebranded it as a Zer0 Books podcast. But then after a while, it kind of bumped back up again. But people at first didn't trust it. Oh, now you're corporate. We're not going to listen to you anymore. But that came back, and then I did YouTube, and that after a while worked. And especially when I started criticizing Jordan Peterson, that worked. Then suddenly people were paying attention to the channel. So
yeah, I that's funny because once blogging his videos started appearing on YouTube, the ones that mentioned Jordan Peterson, I guess because of the algorithm, they got more traffic, and usually it would be from a critical perspective. Although I did one with Katie Herzog where she had like gone to various of his events. This is like 2017 or 18, and wrote a somewhat positive feature about him for some outlet. But yeah, just having his name in there, there were so many Jordan Peterson fans on YouTube that having his name in there showed that content to them, and they got mad and would be in the comments and say like, you don't know what you're talking about. You need to read XYZ.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And like our biggest video was one about Slavoj Žižek and Jordan Peterson, and it's like 500,000 views. and yeah, so that sort of move, and it was actually done. Like I didn't do it for the algorithm. I legitimately was fascinated by and critical of Jordan Peterson. And
it wasn't clear. I mean, people were, once he sort of came on the scene, I guess that was around 2017, people were definitely talking about him, but I didn't see it as like a clickbait sort of thing when I was talking about him. It just, I was sort of shocked that so many people were emotionally exercised by this guy. And looking back on it, it seems strange because I don't know, he sort of faded and become even more stranger and more of a crank. Years.
Although don't count him out. He's still out there. But I would say the other thing that worked was just making video essays online, where I would write an essay, narrate it, and put images to it. Those tended to do pretty well, especially after I made a few about Jordan Peterson, but even before we were growing. And then through that, I kind of I published Killing Normies. We had, several books before that did well enough. Like if we sold over 1,000 copies, we were happy. But but then we sold Killing Normies, and that was in the tens of thousands of copies. And that got the attention of people like Michael Brooks, who came over and did some work with me. Like he was a guest several times, and he wrote a book for us, and he had people on his show from our author list, including Ben Burgess, who he developed a really good relationship with. And so around that time, Killing Normies, and then Ben Burgess and Michael Brooks, we had found our version of the blogging sphere. It was this new media, like YouTube podcast universe for the left that we were pulling from and working with. And so, yeah, so that's sort of how I would describe the difference between what's being called like Zer0 1.0 and Zer0 2.0 is, well, maybe two things. One, I was more Marxist, I think, than my predecessors. I was coming out of a Marxist sect, and so that made me, I was all trained up on, the labor theory of value and Marxist political.
And were those people more like Frankfurt School people?
No, I think they were more like, I don't know. Well, like it there wasn't any center, but like if Mark Fisher was more of a post-Marxist sort of like Derridian, Zizek'ian type, and he wouldn't have been quoting lines from Marx directly very often. It's my feeling, but he was a great writer, really good cultural critic, and I would not put him on he was a fellow traveler. Is how I would put it. Right.
And for people who didn't see this previous episode with Mike Watson, where because his book was the memeing of Mark Fisher. Fisher.
I guess okay. Like everyone,
Fisher died. I don't want to. That probably adds to somewhat of the emotional idea surrounding him or something. Like although he killed himself, and so it's like this tragedy, and then he became much more popular after his death. So probably there were people who were like became partisans of him either before or after his death, and then that sort of became a identity in a way.
Right. The other way to put it wouldn't it be the memeing of Mark Fisher, but the branding of Mark Fisher, and that's the unfortunate thing. And that will be part of the next part of our conversation, but it's not really about Mark Fisher. Yeah, I mean, like Mike Watson would claim that Fisher was influenced by the Frankfurt School, and I'm sure there is truth to that because all of critical theory comes out of the Frankfurt School, and I'm sure that Fisher read Adorno, but I remember reading Sadie Plant in the 90s, who was one of Fisher's colleagues and associates in a little Marxist-y kind of group that was, I don't remember what it was called, but it had something to do with cyberpunk and changing society through acceleration, and it was a cool little group. It was Sadie Plant, Mark Fisher, and I think a guy named Nick Land were all part of this little group. And Sadie Plant wrote a book called The Most Radical Gesture, which changed my life. I read it when I was like 22 years old, and she was probably around the same age when she was writing it. And it was all about the Situationist International, which was this French radical group that was responsible, they say, for the strikes and protests and riots of May of 1968, or at least part of the reason that happened. And the theory of the Situationist International as compared to postmodernism or post-structuralism. And that's what the book was about. So I would say like that spot between Marxism and post-structuralism is where in the 90s, guys like Fisher developed their ideas. And through them, actually, I was the same way. Like until 2008, I was kind of on that same trajectory of sort of, what's the difference between postmodernism and Marxism? I can't tell, which, by the way, goes back to Jordan Peterson and is something that would be his point, but I don't want to grant him too much there.
Because he sort of merged Marxism, postmodernism, and he called it cultural Marxism. At least I think, if I'm remembering this correctly.
Right.
So he was sort of lumping together all these people he didn't like and saying, that like the woke people are the same as the communists. They're all bad.
Yeah.
So something along those lines.
Yeah, something like that. Well, right. And the cultural Marxism, that's an old, like John Birch Society trope, and it's just another way of saying Jews. But okay. um, yeah, the rest of it, and I do think Jordan Peterson may have said that once or twice, then realized what he was doing and changed it. I think he started saying neo-Marxists instead, which is different. Yeah, I mean, Peterson is, and there's another fellow who he really leans on, who wrote a book about postmodernism and its connection to Marxism, whose name is escaping me. But they're wrong in the way they analyze post-structuralism and the way they look at Marxism. But what they're not wrong about is that culturally, for a while, people who might have earlier been calling themselves Marxists might have instead talked about Foucault, or they might have instead talked about Derrida, and as if these things had the same revolutionary potential as Marxist thought did. I think that's true enough. But anyhow, dude. So anyway, so I got let go, right? I mean, it seemed like I was let go, but then.
Well, let me just say you were publishing stuff that was interesting to read as someone who was not, in the debates between the post-structuralists and the neo-Marxists, and
right,
and someone who I know nothing about Marxist theory essentially. But the stuff was accessible. It was often tied to things that were happening online or on social media, and you also had a very quick turnaround, and maybe that's related to this bare bones thing. Whereas usually a book takes, after the manuscript is turned in, it takes like 9 months to a year in a traditional publisher before it comes out. You were talking about things that you read the book and it was something that like 6 months ago happened on Twitter.
Well,
that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't think we ever wrote a book. No one ever wrote a book about something that happened on Twitter that I'm aware of. But you're basically right. Yeah, I mean, okay, Kill All Normies is a good example. That book was a while, and took a while to write for her, and we knew it was coming for a while. But then Trump got elected, and we said, "Oh, we've got to get this book out right away." And there was a downside to it. It wasn't properly copy edited.
I actually noticed that. Yeah, when I first read it, there were some copy editing errors.
Yeah. But we rushed it through because we knew that it was going to hit, and it did hit, and it didn't. I mean, look, the fact is, it didn't matter that it wasn't copy edited properly. It sold well. It made an impact, and people talked about it and thought about the issues that she was raising. Unfortunately, something happened with Kill All Normies, which is symptomatic of a larger problem, which I frankly am still trying to solve. But we can talk about that. Well, I mean, I'll just talk about it now. That book criticized criticized the left, but it was really an expose on the alt-right. But it criticized the left. It didn't, you don't even have to bother really saying that the expose of the alt-right is a criticism. It's, it was more than that. But the criticism of the left was, look, it's moralistic, it's smug, it's dismissive, it's it's focused on individuals rather than structures, and it's off-putting when it embraces certain kinds of online tactics, certain kinds of moral shaming approaches to, especially to individuals. So like that, basically, it did oppose cancel culture. And in the process of opposing cancel culture, Nagel pointed to a few of the reasons that someone might get canceled and made fun of those reasons. Like if you misgender someone by not using the proper pronouns, but not just that, like not using the proper pronouns, of which there are 75 different versions based on, some list on Tumblr. So that, and so by pointing to that kind of ridiculous rule about pronoun usage, Nagel opened up the space for people to attack her and cancel her based on her own supposed transphobia or a myriad of other crimes. And the sad thing was, and there was enough heat on her, and she had whatever kind of personality that is required to not be able to tolerate that. So that she, I think, I would say at this point, she is broken with the left, at least as far as I can tell. She's no longer associating with what I would call the left, and is instead appearing on conservative radio programs. And and I don't know if that means that her ambitions for socialism have altered. I would say probably she would say they haven't, but she no longer operates as a part of at least the American left, as far as I can tell. And what that has done is confirmed everyone who disliked her book to begin with in their original estimation, despite the fact that the criticisms were pretty much sound. And
right, so it was like she was a wolf in sheep's clothing all along, sort of.
Yeah, right, but
thing.
Yeah, but I don't believe that's the case. I think it's more like we are shaped by, not like she's not responsible or you made her do this or anything like that, but it's more like we're shaped by the moments that we're in. And if she was living in a moment where criticism and debate and multiple and different perspectives were possible to have on the left, she might not change her positions very much, but she would still be part of the left. She wouldn't be just relegated to right-wing spaces. But for careerist reasons, if you're going to criticize the left the way she wants to, you have to do it from the right, for the most part. And so,
and I this is actually something that I was, again, another sort of side note. I wanted to, I think I may have even posted this on the Bloggingheads comment forum at some point, but there's this whole sort of meta debate about cancel culture. Does it exist? As people say, this is just sort of, if you're canceled, you can come back. Whatever, if you're canceled, is actually good for you. If no one is ever actually canceled because Louis C.K. is still touring, and et cetera, et cetera. And the thing that I thought was like, cancel culture can be sort of like you can lean into it and turn it to your advantage, but you have to be sort of a media figure, have some sort of media platform. If you're a normal person who gets caught up in something like this and gets quote unquote canceled, that's almost always bad for you.
Yeah.
But if you're like somewhat, if you're, if you're some media figure, if you're a writer, if you have a podcast, or you're a content creator, or that's what we're calling it these days.
Right.
And then you transgress in some way, people get mad at you, and then you make a big deal out of it. Then you have suddenly 10,000 people who want to subscribe to your newsletter or something like that.
Yeah, but it's not the same people, right? That's the thing. Like for someone who's on the left, the choice when you get canceled is either to lean into it and go to the right and find that new audience who will love you for being hated by the left.
Exactly.
Or try to survive it and navigate it to hold on to the left audience that wouldn't cancel you, and maybe push forward an idea that it's not a great idea to cancel people. I mean, I have been canceled recently. I mean, apart from being let go, like that was not the same thing. Maybe I wasn't canceled. Maybe I was just ratioed. I'm not sure what the difference is. But I was ratioed because I tweeted in defense of Dave Chappelle's comedy special. And that I got like days and days of
and then that's another thing. I don't want to.
We don't want to talk about that.
We're not talking about that. But that shows how the dynamic such that people are still talking about Dave Chappelle's comedy special months after it aired because of the controversial aspects of it. If you're someone like Dave Chappelle, being talked about is ultimately positive or negative. It's sort of like the Trump phenomenon. Trump just wanted to be in the news, positive or negative, just get his name on the streets.
Yeah, well,
that sort of thing. It ultimately helps Dave Chappelle because people are just like, oh, Dave Chappelle. And
look, I tell you what, that's exactly right. And that's why I talked about Dave Chappelle, because we have a book called Canceling Comedians While the World Burns. And I thought, oh, they're trying to cancel Dave Chappelle. I should promote Canceling Comedians While the World Burns. in this mix and see if we can sell some copies that way. And I tweeted, and it didn't really work at first at all. So then I tweeted again, and that just it did not help. It did not help canceling comedians for me to get involved. You get a ratioing. So I think I don't know, like if Chappelle had turned around and embraced me, right? If I gotten a little love from Chappelle, then, but he didn't seem to even notice I was there. He didn't even notice me. And so,
well, yeah. What can you do? I mean, that's the problem. There's,
I'm going to go to his house. That's what I'm going to do. No.
Yeah, it is a strange phenomenon where, I don't know, you just like, if the people, everyone seems to, everyone who wants to cancel someone seems not to realize how it ultimately helps them. And maybe the Chappelle thing will be some sort of turning point, because I'm sure, the people who worked at Netflix who like protested and like walked out or something, it was just more attention. This is an attention economy. Like, it's just more attention for Dave Chappelle. People are saying the words Dave Chappelle. It's like, it's ultimately good for Dave Chappelle's bottom line.
Right.
Like, whereas the thing that kills people in the attention economy is not paying attention to them. It just moving on to the next thing, because there's always some other thing. Just move on to the next comedy special and promote that one or something. It just like getting so exercised about these culture war or things related to speech.
Yeah.
It just seems so obvious that it's backfiring now.
Yeah, it's called the Streisand effect.
Right.
Yeah.
Then you point something out, and
I feel like if people didn't recognize how it backfired when it came to Jordan Peterson, they're not going to ever recognize it. It's like, Jordan Peterson's even a more profound case because he was not known at all until.
Yeah. Well, but also like Jordan Peterson has like a political program. Like Dave Chappelle is an entertainer who just talks about politics and cultural issues in his latest stand-up in a way that offended some people. I guess I haven't seen it. I don't want to.
Right? No. I know, but I'm just saying, like,
but
I mean,
so he, Jordan.
But Dave Chappelle was famous already.
Yeah,
he's very, very funny, and it wasn't just the fact that he was canceled that put him into the spotlight. That just was one part of a marketing strategy for him, right? He had another part of his marketing strategy was he's in a car with driving down the road, and Morgan Freeman is narrating his thoughts, apparently. But then it turns out, no, Morgan Freeman is sitting next to him in the car. And as he gets to the destination, Dave Chappelle turns Morgan Freeman and says, shut up, man.
Okay, marketing strategy, that's perfect. And it's almost like, well, these people should read their marks. Like they should like sort of do like a who benefits, follow the money sort of thing for this stuff, and just see that intentionally. I don't know if Chappelle was consciously like, if I make jokes about trans women, that that's going to get a lot of attention and make me more prominent than I was a year ago. I don't know if he thought that, but like that's how it ended up.
Oh, I think
a conscious cynical strategy, or just that's the way it has worked out. It just seems like, this is.
I think what he thought was, if I oppose cancel culture, something like if I oppose the way these people are coming after comedians, if I oppose the crowd of the angry mob of Twitter people, then that will get me popular more than make offensive jokes about trans people. That was just one way to do that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, obviously he's a smart, canny guy, so you're probably right that he could sort of see how this would play out. And and
I'd also bet he feels really not very happy with those people who say mean things about him online.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Right. But
so it's a win-win, for Dave Chappelle.
Right.
And maybe it's even a win-win for the people who oppose him in the sense that they get attention for their thing, whatever it is. And so nothing actually changes except, the person who has the anti-Dave Chappelle newsletter, podcast, whatever, like they get some attention for their thing also. And
right. No.
It just rolls on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This is one of the things about our phony politics online is that it's a great way for nothing to change.
That's well put.
But let me talk a little bit about my own personal drama.
Yes. enough Dave Chappelle.
Yeah. So what happened was eventually the people who had originally founded Zer0 Books were able to convince or Watkins Media, or Watkins Publishing, I mean, was able to convince John Hunt to go ahead and sell his company. He had actually already sold 29% of it to Watkins a few years ago. So I knew that this was going to happen eventually, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And when the first time I heard about it probably happening, I mentioned to John Hunt that first of all, if that ever happened, I would not be able to stay, that they would get rid of me immediately, because they had made it clear that they didn't want anyone to run Zer0 Books in their absence. And the first person that John Hunt tried to hire was convinced to quit after 2 days by people in his social milieu applying pressure in various ways. I don't know what they did. I don't know if they threatened his cat or what they did, but they, I'm making that up completely. But
they wanted the imprint to essentially fold. Someone has to, someone has to work there.
They wanted it to fail, and maybe so they could buy it up.
Okay.
But they wanted it to not work, not to function without them. By the way, at this moment, I understand the sentiment. So, being on the other side of this now, right. So when I got hired there, I was an American. I didn't know any of the people who had originally founded it. I was someone who had a book proposal accepted. That's really my only in there. And I knew another author there and had interviewed him on my podcast. And he recommended me for the job, and I got hired as their second choice. And when I took over, they were not happy with me, and they continued not to be happy with me the entire time I ran the imprint. And I would say when we had successes, that made them upset, even more upset. So I knew that I would be ejected when they bought the company, that they weren't going to keep me on and let me run the imprint anymore. So then, I said to John Hunt at that moment, look, I've created a YouTube channel, a podcast, and Patreon. If we part ways, the Patreon that's now going to pay my salary and some of the other people in marketing, I'm going to just take that with me in the YouTube with me if we go, because I built that up, and I'd like to get a contract stating that. And he said, oh yeah, no problem. You built it up. You made it. I wouldn't have a problem with you taking it. And Dominic.
Wait, okay, so just to clarify, are you talking to John Hunt, the human, or John Hunt?
John Hunt, the person. Yeah, it's the same thing, but yes, John Hunt, the person. I was visiting in London. It's one of the 2 times I ever met him. And Dominic at that moment said, oh, well, I agree, in principle, but we would have to protect the company. That's the guy who was actually managing the company at that point. John Hunt was sort of quasi-retired. So I thought, okay, well, this is good. And thought, well, maybe eventually I'll get a contract, and I would bet they're going to say in the contract something like, if you go your own way, we're going to demand 25% of all revenue, or something like, say, get some cut of whatever I did with these things in the future, which I might have been willing to, we would negotiate, and I would sign something like that. Or if they just paid me a whole bunch of money up front, and probably not nearly as much as it would have been worth, I would have probably signed it all over to them. But none of that happened. But then when they sold Zer0 Books, they sold the YouTube channel and the Patreon with it. And so
these are all branded as Zer0 Books.
Yeah, they're all branded as Zer0 Books, which does add a complication to it. Like, if I realized later. So yeah, it was like the Zer0 Books YouTube channel, inside Zer0 Books, the Patreon, and Zero Squared, the Zer0 Books podcast. But they let me keep Zero Squared because it was on the same feed as Diet Soap, which was my original podcast, and so they didn't contest that. And at this point, I should make this statement: I have no legal claim to any of these things. I've relinquished them all. They are now owned wholly by Watkins Publishing. So I am not making any legal claims to them. I want to make that. You should put that on the front and put a big sticker on this that says that Doug does not make any legal claims.
Okay. As long as we're stating that sort of stuff, I am, like I said, an outsider to this, and we're getting one side of the story, obviously, and so if someone from the other side wants to come on and present their side of things, I'd be happy to have that on also. But
I don't think you're getting one. I mean, I know it's my side, but I think I'm actually, for instance, I will tell you, their big claim would be, well, just because I use the brand, I built the reputation of the YouTube channel and my own reputation on their brand, and that gave them some claim. And I don't know how that would have worked out. That's one of the reasons why I have relinquished all rights to the YouTube channel and the Patreon, because I didn't really know how that would. I mean, I could imagine arguing the other side of that, and that there's evidence for the other side, but that's one of those ambiguous questions in law. Like, what's the right of the creator, the uncontracted freelancer, as against the right of the brand that he was using?
And actually, and then also, because this is in the UK, it maybe the laws there are
a little different, but not that different
in the US. Okay, but also it reminds me somewhat of like sort of the early days of like Marvel Comics, where these artists created Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four and so forth, and they were sort of like work for hire kind of people, and these geniuses, Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, in the early '60s, they created all these characters that are now worth hundreds of billions of dollars in intellectual property, but because like they and then some, and there have been lawsuits from their heirs and stuff.
Right, but the difference probably is they really did work for hire, meaning they had contracts. I bet you they had contracts. I bet you there was some agreement about
there probably was, and they were probably they were probably exploitative contracts, right. Screwing over these.
The difference here was no contract at all. Like, but without a contract, without a work for hire contract in general across Europe and the United States and UK, the creator just owns the rights. It's not even a question. Except in this case, it wasn't just that I was creating something. It was like I was creating something and branding it as something, at the same time. And like, I thought of myself as creating content to promote the brand and the books. But I think they would say, having founded the brand, that I use the brand to promote myself and the books.
Mm-hmm.
So, in any case, so that was the dispute. That was what the dispute came down to. And I guess they would claim I wasn't let go because I was only a freelancer, so they didn't even have to let me go. And also maybe they would have hired me on to do something else rather than being the publishing manager. I kind of doubt that, but it's possible. They might have offered me some small position somewhere, but it wouldn't have been at the level where I was making a living, which is I was one of the few people who actually made enough to make a living from this. I mean, almost everyone else who's a contractor was making at best a part-time living working for John Hunt, and I made my salary that from John Hunt. So that's the dispute. That's what happened. But the interesting thing is, since that's happened, it has been cast by some people as an opportunity for Zer0 Books to move away from the anti-woke, suspicious, possibly crypto-fascist even Zer0 Books of my time, and back to the purity of, I don't know, King's College London, and I'm being bitter. I'm being petty. Okay.
It's funny. It's funny to me that like there probably are, there's some group of socialists or Marxists or something who see some other group of Marxists as crypto-fascists instead of like the obvious fascists, that like some of them were like marching through Washington D.C. like a memorial over the weekend, wearing matching outfits and white masks and carrying American flags. Like, those are the real fascists. Like, we have them now. They're no longer crypto. Maybe 20 years ago, the fascists were crypto. They're out there now,
right?
And literally waving flags proudly.
Right. I know. And I don't know. Like, it's unclear to me. I mean, I know no one at Repeater or the new Zer0 Books has directly accused me of being crypto fascist. That's down the line.
But you see that sort of, the accusation.
Like, look, right now I'm wearing a shirt that says United States on it. Like, I'm unabashedly embracing.
Okay, well, let me ask. So when this story broke, I saw something about it on Twitter, and I was like, "Oh, this is weird," because just because I know you a little bit, I had you on the show, and I saw people like celebrating your downfall, and I was like, "Wait, did I what am I missing with the story?" So like, why were there people who were like dancing in the streets metaphorically on Twitter?
I think it was because of my Chappelle. I think it's my Chappelle tweet. It was like the timing so close to the Chappelle tweet, and also Angela Nagel. And also, like, I had Jesse Singal on, and
I've had Jesse Singal on, so
yeah, I know.
no one is no one cares enough about me to celebrate or mourn, whatever happens to be. But
right.
Okay. So
but I would say also like the people on Twitter it's been mixed, right? The people on Twitter has been mixed. There's some people who are defending me and not happy that I'm gone, and some people who are happy. But like on the YouTube channel and on the Patreon that have now been turned over, it's been pretty uniform that people are not happy with the me being gone, and I want to tell all those people who are unhappy that the new Patreon is patreon.com/dietsoap, DIETSOAP, and look for Doug Lain on YouTube because there's a new YouTube channel as well.
Okay, and links to those things will be below. If people want to continue supporting you in your new efforts.
Yeah, we're going to be publishing books as well. We've got 6 books lined up for 2022. Can you believe it's that far down the line? I mean, 2022, my God, that's the future. But yeah, we're going to be publishing. And we got Todd McGowan, who's our first author on the about a book called Enjoying It, Left and Right. Todd McGowan's like a Hegelian type who's sort of aligned with Zizek. So sort of a fun Hegelian instead of like a type of Hegelian that will make you think about the in itself and the for itself. And
the fun Hegelians. Is that a group? Is that the young Hegelians? The fun Hegelians?
The fun Hegelians. Yeah, they came after the young brand.
Okay, so let's talk about the new efforts and what's going to be different than your reign at Zer0 Books. Are you going to use the same sort of bare bones model that enables now, or
kind of? I mean, we're not going to automate everything. We're going to. So the big difference is we're not taking slush for the first 2 years. We're not going to
explain what that means for people who don't know.
We're not going to take unsolicited submissions. If you worked at Zer0 Books or you want to you reach out to me because you're an author and you kind of know me, you can do that. I mean, look, that's how this publishing game works, unfortunately. But we're not going to take people we don't know and look at their manuscripts for 2 years.
Okay, and the slush pile is unsolicited manuscripts. That's the publishing industry term.
Right. And so,
which maybe tells you something about how the publishing industry views, authors who don't have agents or something like that. But
authors who don't already have a track record end up in the slush, unless they know people who know people, in which case maybe they skip it. Look, I was a science fiction writer and am a science fiction writer, and I was in the slush pile with short fiction for years and years and years, and I know how important slush pile is actually for people. So one of the things we're going to do instead for the first 2 years is we're going to run a Substack journal, and we're going to take essays, and we'll take slush only for the most part unsolicited manuscripts there. I mean, we're going to have a team of people who are just regular writers for the journal to make sure we can keep content, the content mill going. But we're going to take unsolicited manuscripts for the journal, essays of 1 to 4,000 words. And then if you get published there, that would be step 1 on being possibly published as an author for the company later on. That's how we're going to vet people who are unknown to us. So yeah, it's a very different approach than what was going on at John Hunt Publishing structurally, but I'm going to try to publish the same kinds of books, especially the kinds of books that did well. I mean, like at John Hunt, the model was sort of publish a lot and see what sticks. And we're going to publish fewer books, at the most half as many as we published at John Hunt. At the first time out, even less than that, 6 titles the first year. With the aim of having each one sort of hit like a big Ben Burgess book would, or like an Angela Nagel book would. I mean, that's a tall order, but that's what we're going to aim at, is to have all these books come in and intervene in the left. I mean, I think of it as intervening in the left. And by the way, I consider you to be within the realm of the left, not really a socialist, obviously.
No, I mean, it's funny.
Ultimately needing re-education, after the revolution.
Yeah, I will definitely be sent to the camps after the revolution, but maybe,
we don't call them camps. It's just their re-education centers. So that word camps is bad connotation.
Yeah, this often comes up because what are my politics, especially like lefties, or like, how do I not get it? How have I not seen the light, sort of thing? I don't know. I just like, yeah, I'm interested. I'm a friend of the left, like, or at least a friend of a lot of lefties, and think they're interesting people, but I just don't buy into the whole thing. But I know I'm trying to.
What do you say your politics are, like center liberal?
Yeah, I've described myself as an Obama '08 Democrat. That was the last politician I was excited about. Obviously, disappointed various people in various ways, but and I've said this before on the podcast that in the movie Get Out, the father says, I would have voted for Obama a third time, and then it's revealed that he's like this evil, he's this evil monster who's stealing the bodies of black people. But like I would have voted for Obama a third time also, very happily. So there's that. And yeah, but that's so even not even a centrist Democrat. I would say I'm like a progressive Democrat or something.
Right, okay, so if you're a progressive Democrat, that is, I think, where a lot of the even socialist left actually ends up. Like our actual politics end up being, oh, I'm going to vote for Dennis Kucinich. Not to date myself too much there with that reference, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, okay. Yeah. Because the people who truly want to upend the system, are,
they still have to go to the polls.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't not vote. I mean, some of them that don't vote, but if you talk about like where energy ends up, like the socialists are in the DSA, right? These days, but the DSA is just a progressive, influential, like a pressure group on the Democrats to move them towards what your kind of politics.
Okay, because they're not arguing for a revolution.
No, it's just because they're not creating their own. It's not creating their own party even. Like the Green parties are kind of a pressure group, but they're less obviously so. But like, but in the case of DSA,
in the two-party system, any minor party has almost no chance nationally.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So it makes sense. So to work, that's the Tea Party strategy. Work to like radicalize the party from within, or like semi within, but.
So my aim at now, it's called Diet Soap Media, and I can tell you why it's called that if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah. What is that? I was struck by that name. What does that come from?
Okay, I started a zine in 1992 called Diet Soap, and when I was 21 years old and drunk on my stoop with a friend trying to come up with a name for the zine, I did not think I would be burdened by it at the age of 50 as I tried to start a real publishing company. But somehow or another, through the process of elimination, that was the name that stuck. It was the name of my podcast as well as I started out. And Diet Soap, when I was 21, what I thought it meant was that's a commodity nobody needs. And that's how it is in capitalism. No one needs it. No.
Okay.
I was 21, and that was not exactly right. The people do need capitalism because it's a system of production and distribution, and bad as it is, it does provide needs in a roundabout way. But nonetheless, that was the idea. It's like a commodity nobody needs. And the other part of that story is the first issue of Diet Soap had a picture of the bullet that killed Kennedy on the cover, the magic bullet. And it was because I wanted my zine to do what that bullet did, which is this miracle where it went all over the place everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
It seems like a young man's metaphor also.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, that's Diet Soap.
Okay, cool. So that's okay. Diet Soap is the new imprint, and the Patreon is Diet Soap. And the YouTube channel is Douglas Lain, but it's also Diet Soap Media with Douglas Lain. And we're going to be publishing books, and we're going to have that journal through Substack that I mentioned, and we're doing podcasts and YouTube videos, and we are hoping to even make a documentary film based on Aryeh Serious's book, The Freaks in the Machine, which may be coming out from Zer0 Books. I don't know. There's some dispute there, but I can't go into that. But anyway, we started working on the documentary with him right before I left Zer0 Books, and so, we have a lot of plans, and it means that I need to remember to stand up from this chair, or else I'll get deep vein thrombosis or whatever. But we're going to be doing a lot. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so I wish you good luck. Because I've enjoyed the stuff you've worked on and helped put out. I do want to. I mean, this raises an interesting question about like branding and how in this world of content creators, how you should brand yourself. And I'm thinking like, so when Ezra Klein had um at when he was at the Washington Post, there was something. It was just like a wonk blog. That's what it was called. And then he left, and wonk blog kept going, even though he like started wonk blog, and maybe originally wonk blog was just him essentially working on it. And then when he went to Vox, he started the Ezra Klein show, and obviously he left Vox and moved to the Times, and they couldn't Vox couldn't take over the Ezra Klein show and say this is the Ezra Klein show without Ezra Klein, and now we have some other person hosting it. And so so the Ezra Klein show continues now as a New York Times podcast. And obviously, he's like a superstar, so he can basically do whatever he wants. But it is something I've thought about, especially as I'm now on my own YouTube channel. I was thinking, how should I brand that? Because should I call it the Aryeh Cohen-Wade channel? Because that's truly something that no one else is going to take away from you or whatever want. So,
I would call it culturally determined with Aryeh Cohen-Wade.
Yeah, so I ended up just calling it culturally determined, but it is an interesting sort of puzzle of how you position yourself, and so you became highly identified with the Zer0 Books brand, and then but they were able to kick you out, and they keep Zer0 Books. You of course have your name, you have this old name from your past that you're bringing up, but it is sort of like. Yeah, and Vox itself, like all the people who originally founded Vox, like are gone from Vox, but it still continues on as Vox. I don't know. It's like a puzzle when you're trying to think about these things. And so like also on Bloggingheads, there's the Glenn show with Glenn Lowry. Of course, no one else can host the Glenn show. And there's the Wright show with Bob Wright. No one else is going to host that one. But you can.
And then there's a Bob and Mickey show.
Yes. They actually call that the Parrot Room, and which I thought was sort of a mistake because the name I thought.
Oh, by the way. You guys might want to sue me because I call the patron-only content for my show the Parrot Room as well. Right. Because Bob said he wanted people to use the word Parrot Room whenever they did a Patreon.
So if it comes to be known that your Patreon bonus is the Parrot Room, I guess that's sort of that'll end up in Bob's obituary or something. But I thought they should call it Bob and Mickey Sell Out, and that would be branded with their name and but they didn't go with that, and I don't even know if I actually suggest that. Maybe that was just a thought I had. But it is, it's interesting to think about these things as more and more of us are sort of content creators in some respect or other, and how you brand yourself.
Can we talk about what's going on at Bloggingheads a little bit? I mean, I don't need all the inside details, but I'm a fan of Bloggingheads. Like when it comes to getting a perspective on the news and political analysis from what I will call the reality-oriented community rather than the socialist one. Mm-hmm. And by the way, like I consider myself to be like George Bush, and then people can cut that out and put that out everywhere. In so much as I'm not part of the reality-based community, I think we can act to change the foundation of society. We can act to change reality. But if you're, that the working class people have the power to change the world. But if you're not looking to change the world fundamentally, and you just want to know kind of what's going on, like I think Bloggingheads has a really interesting approach to doing political analysis and opinion, and the history of it is amazing. It's like there was a show with Glenn Greenwald debating some New York Times right-wing journalist. His name I should know right off David Brooks, I think it was, or someone.
I think it would have been David Brooks, but it's very possible that Glenn was set up with Eli Lake or someone like that back in the day.
Right.
It's sort of. I mean, I've done it. I did an episode with Bob where we sort of reminisced about the early days, but
it was amazing what you guys were pulling off. You had real established insider New York and global journalists coming through Bloggingheads, right? And because it was the only platform like it, and of course Bob comes out of New Republic, very highly pedigreed professional background, and so it was a great model. But it seems like now YouTube has come along and made Bloggingheads into something else, and like the funding model is different as Patreon. It's like everyone else. You're like everybody else.
Yeah,
your YouTubers, your Patreon. It's maybe making good money. I don't know, but the point is, like, it was its own platform and thing, And I guess that platform still
sort
exists.
of different. Yeah, there were sort of different levels of it. And so originally it was just Bob and Mickey, and then they started bringing other people on to talk to either Bob or Mickey, and then they started pairing up people to talk to each other. And this was all when video on the web was very early, and it was very novel to see someone whose blog you were reading, to see their face on video.
You guys use like a telegraph wire, right? And
well,
like old black and white TV set.
This was before broadband was even common, and so what people would do was they would call each other on the phone, and that's why in some of the old ones, like you see John McWhorter holding like a cord, a phone with a cord to his ear, and they would tape themselves either using a webcam or possibly even a video recorder that would like produce a physical thing, and then they would either upload it or possibly even send it in the mail to a central location where it would be knitted together. So this is digitally transferred.
Yes,
and so it was a laborious process that anticipated what would become sort of a standard model, but the technology wasn't there to do it. So Bob saw the future and helped sort of go towards that using the limited technology that was available in 2005. But at the same time,
and when did YouTube start?
There's a reason. Well, YouTube also started in 2005, I think.
Oh,
they're roughly at the same time. But it ended up that obviously YouTube is a global behemoth and Bloggingheads is still a niche thing, and because Bloggingheads wasn't an open platform, it was it was content. And Bob wanted to exercise editorial vision like a magazine, which is the world he came from, and so it didn't become the platforms ended up taking over the globe instead of the
I don't think
creators themselves.
Email a VHS cassette to my friend in Albuquerque and he'll edit it for you is whatever have taken over the world. But
he also anticipated podcasts in a way, because the initial thing, and still it always sort of was a podcast, and it was available as audio only very early on, even before podcast was a widely known term. And so that was another thing that Bob anticipated, that people would just want to listen in on writers, journalists, academics, interesting people having long form conversations. And my critique of how this all ended is how this all ended up was it could have, by continuing to keep the video aspect going, that sort of added, especially sort of in the mid period, 2009, 2015 or so, it added all this extra work that was required on the back end, because it was still Skype and Zoom and so forth weren't available. And so it was still sort of this laborious process to produce these videos that were not themselves so inherently interesting that most people would want to just watch the video, because it always was essentially an audio medium, except people talking to each other who are maybe not the sort of people who would appear on mainstream television, and like you and me perhaps, and so are perhaps not so inherently either physically attractive or charismatic.
Speak for yourself.
That the average person wants to sit and watch it for half an hour or something like that.
Yeah.
So it always sort of was a audio podcast with a visual element, and it's still sort of in that in between this liminal space between podcast and YouTube world. Whereas the people who are like YouTube only things, they do a lot of stuff where it's like, hey, what's up, YouTubers? Blah 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 blah. They talk in a specific way, and the screenshot is always some guy like that, like that. So Bob was never interested in any of that sort of stuff either, and didn't super care about just getting as many hits as possible.
Right.
So the fact that the company became a nonprofit, and
I do that other thing. I mean, I even have thumbnails of me making that face. But
you got to play the game, yeah.
Yeah, right. But those are mostly for video essays, not YouTubers, not the vlog. And then I do a kind of a Blogginghead style podcast, but I started out as a podcaster on audio only. And then over time, around 2017, really made it like a Bloggingheads audio podcast, but it was because the technology was there for me to use easily. And the other thing that YouTube enables is things can go viral on YouTube, whereas it's more difficult for a podcast to go viral because for various reasons, but it just can't. I mean, it can go. I guess it could if someone used some other medium like Twitter.
It relies the podcasts that go viral. Usually have like Serial would be the first podcast that went super broke into the mainstream, well, Serial was coming from This American Life, which is a well-established radio brand and had like public radio people working on it, so it was a highly polished product. And then, yeah, honestly, I think that if you, aside from like the things that are the Apple iTunes or Apple Podcast app recommends, like word of mouth is probably the way that most people hear about podcasts. So it has like a very old-fashioned aspect to it. And so actually, I might as well mention this here. So the only people who are still watching and listening to this are the hardcore fans, I assume. But I'm going to be transitioning entirely off the platform. That'd be the euphemistic way to say it. Within the next couple months, and because I need to actually start earning some money from this and have a Patreon. And I think the way that makes the most sense to do it would be to eliminate the video entirely, and then the editing could be a lot simpler, something I could do myself easily instead of having to pay someone. And so I'm trying to figure out how to.
Are you sure about that? Because
I'm trying to think whether that would make sense or not, because I really do see this as an audio podcast where you happen to be able to see the faces of the people. And unless I'm wrong, I'm not such a compelling screen presence that people just absolutely have to see my lovely face.
Right, but it doesn't cost you anything to stay on YouTube. Right,
so I could stay on YouTube without the video, essentially.
No. You could go, look, here's what I do. Let me tell you what I do. I do StreamYard. I make a StreamYard video that goes right to YouTube. I save it as a recorded stream, so it's unlisted on YouTube. Then I download it and I put a already made little video file at the start saying, "Hi, this is a podcast. This is the show." And then sometimes I don't. I just find out where I want it to end. I don't even really edit the stream, depending on whether or not I remember. Like maybe I sneezed or someone left the room or something. It might clip that out. But if I remember to, but then I just put the stream up, upload it to YouTube with the thing at the beginning and at the end. Then I take that video file, the MP4, make it into an MP3 file and drop that into my RSS feed. So now look, when I started podcasting, and maybe I shouldn't tell people all that because now they're going to be, that's what I'm paying for. But when I started podcasting in 2009, I would record Skype calls and just the audio. And then I would spend a couple of days editing. I would edit out all the ums and ahs. And really very clean podcast with even like a little audio collage in the middle or something to illustrate a point, and these little polished like radio programs. And moving to YouTube and doing streams that turn into the podcast has completely eliminated that aspect of it. But it has also given me time to work on video collages to draw people in. And I think the conversation, like this conversation we've had right now, do you think it needs to be edited? What would we need to cut out?
Yeah, probably not. And, I guess the people listening at home have their own opinions.
We need to cut out everything from the first moment until right now. But other than that,
essentially I need to think about, and we're getting really into the weeds here, I need to think about, do I want it to be more like a loose flowing sort of thing, which is always what it's been, or should I try to make it more like quote unquote professional, like something you would hear if like, Vox or Slate or something produced a podcast with music, and it would be shorter, there would be editing. I'm still sort of deciding all that. But people, I'm very open to suggestion on this. And so if people in the comments have any opinion, what do you get out of the video when I'm not doing either graphics, video collages, or the crazy faces kind of thing that is popular on YouTube? Would you be fine with an audio only product? Would the video product be the Patreon bonus? Like that's one option. The other thing is, I think there still are people who I would want to get on as guests who don't want to show their face. And that would make that easier. Like if I want to talk to some strange Twitter type person who is anonymous, obviously you can do that just by putting their image up or something, but it would just be simpler without that entirely. Yeah. So sound off in the comments, literally, or I am eager for people's opinion on that. And at some point there's going to be Culture Determined will be an independent operation with some sort of Patreon/advertising model. Still figuring that out, but I think it's going to happen within a couple months. So yeah.
All right.
So smash that subscribe button if you want to keep getting this content.
And now you need to make that face again and put that on the cover of this.
I get the soy boy or whatever face.
Yeah, do the soy boy face. I think you do it all the time naturally, so you don't have to worry. All right. Well, it's been fun. I hope that I didn't say anything during this that will get me to reignite a lawsuit, but I don't think I did.
I don't think so either. But and that is sort of another thing of like, having the ability to cut things out, not because you think it might get sued or something, but that's obviously easier to do with audio than video. I'm thinking about these things, and this has been interesting for that aspect, in addition to just the unusual story of how this all came out. Okay, so do you want to say once again the various places people could find you?
Sure. I want to say, and I also want to say that since I've left Zer0 Books, the Patreon, 2/3 of the people who are supporting me on the Patreon have come over to my new Patreon.
Oh, that's great.
Already. Yeah. So it's patreon.com Diet Soap /Diet Soap, DIETSOAP. And look for me on YouTube. It's Douglas Lain. Or if you type in Diet Soap Media, you'll find me as well. Don't look for me on Twitter. You can, but there's someone impersonating me on Twitter. And not so kindly. I guess I'm not loved on Twitter. I don't know what to do about this exactly.
Because you were running you were essentially running the Zer0 Books social media feed.
Right. And now that's there. That's gone. That's not me anymore. Yeah. And so now someone has this Twitter feed called Doug Lain at zer0bookspublishing.com is their Twitter handle. And they say things like all the only girls fans, all the OnlyFans girls I follow will eventually have sexy with me. I know it, and stuff like that. So, my thought when I saw that, I was like, how does this person have access to my unconscious mind?
Well, the truest compliment is when your haters feel like they, you're living rent free in this person's head, whoever this is. And, once you have someone mocking you full time, that means you've arrived, on some level of success. Right. I would love to have someone out there, imitating me online. If you want to do that, we can work together, You're going
to have to pay somebody to do it. I have my guy doing it for free.
Yeah, we can instigate fights behind the scenes. It would help both of us. It would really be a non-zero relationship. Okay. Well, anything else you want to say before we?
No, that's it. But maybe something off the record. I just want to ask you about Bloggingheads, but we'll
stop the recording, and and maybe this will be the sort of thing that in someday the Patreon. Patreon exclusive.
You should definitely do like 2 sessions with your guests and have a parrot room style.
Yeah, something
that works. Like when I named the second hour parrot room and said we're going to let our hair down and just talk and gossip and say stuff we wouldn't say in public. Like we got more patrons.
Okay. Yeah, that is, I thought, having a bonus segment of some sort is another obvious sort of thing that would, people would pay for the bonus segment. So that's something I'm concerned. Also, yes, if you want that sort of thing, say it in the comments. Okay. Yeah.
Every week I tell my kid that, my son, like, oh, you know what tomorrow is? It's Friday. He said, what is tomorrow? I said, it's an old white guy day. It's old white guy day with Bob and Mickey.
It's true. Okay. Well, let's stop things there. Thank you, Doug. Thank you to our viewers and listeners, and we'll see you again next time.